Um, yes. Okay, so Joy will, take over, and so we'll do the Q&A.
Okay.
All right, guys. So now's your chance to ask Jeff questions. So type them into the chat. All right, give everybody a minute here to type your questions.
Oh, you want me to tell my little story while they're
yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, please.
All right.
Yeah, let's start with that. Thank you.
Oh, it was kind of cool. It's self-aggrandizing, of course, right? But so we wrote it in '86, and it aired obviously then in that fall. And I got married in 1987, and that next summer. And one of the places we went on our honeymoon was Paris. And we were in Paris, I think the second or third night we were there. We were sitting in an outdoor restaurant on the Seine, looking at the Eiffel Towers in the distance, and just an incredibly romantic setting. It was just kind of a perfect setting, beautiful night. And someone just said, which episode? This is the Shakespeare episode. And we were sitting there just talking, having dinner, and there were two. It was that kind of seating where you're very close to the tables next to you. It kind of feels like you're eating with them in a way. But pretty close, and there were two women sitting at a table pretty close to us, and we were, Dory, my wife and I were just talking, and I started hearing the two women next to me started to talk about Moonlighting, and how much they liked it, and they were talking about the season, and they started talking about this episode and how it was their favorite. I think one of them said, I wasn't sure at first because it was so different, but I came to like it a lot and kept talking, and it was really fun. So Dory and I just sort of sat and listened to him. We were smiling, and it was just kind of fun hearing. It was just a really positive conversation. And it got to a point where one of them said, oh my God, and that speech at the end, that was so beautiful. I am in love with whoever wrote that speech. That was verbatim. And I looked over and said, I'm sorry, I'm taken. And she looked at me and said, what? And I explained, and we ended up talking for about half an hour. But they were really nice and big fans. You guys would have loved them. It was just cool. Halfway across the world, and I happened to be sitting next to on this beautiful night, and the perfect night, and she literally said that, and I don't know, it was kind of a perfect situation. So one of those memories. It was pretty cool. Anyway, that was it.
Hey, let's see what everybody's asking here. All right. Well, the fans have some questions about some of the other episodes as well here.
Okay, I'll do my best. I don't remember a lot, but I will do my best.
Okay. Can you settle a debate since you were just talking about did Cybill say Bruce when she climbed into the bed under the sheet with him in the Big Bang I'm Curious Maddie episode? Do you know?
I don't know. I honestly don't know the answer. I think I heard you guys debating about that some other time, whether it was online or something, and I'm sorry. I'm just honestly not sure. I'm not sure.
Do you know if Cybill was holding Bruce up at the end, or was he leaning on something, in front of the fountain at the end of the episode?
At this one, back in the Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, when he's bent over backwards.
Yes.
She's kissing him. You mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was held up. There was a little kind of a brace underneath that was hidden by her dress.
Where did you get the idea for the sight gags like the BMW and the oversized glasses?
Just thought it was cool. It's always hard to answer where did you get the idea for. I mean, in a lot of instances, we obviously could kind of look at the play and and take off on it. Like I said, that was the BMW was Ron's idea. I think it's just I guess the only answer that really makes sense is we knew we were doing a contemporary version. We knew a lot of the humor was the fact that we were taking this Elizabethan period and doing it, with a very contemporary kind of spin. And so I think that's kind of the foundation for jokes like that. You just kind of think about, what what kind of thing would be funny with that juxtaposition, the old fashioned stuff with the new, it's the same thing about, it's really in the same vein as Bruce saying, "What's shaking, y'all?" It's really, what will make the horse more contemporary that's funny? What will make his words more contemporary that are funny? It's all about that. And, I'll add here, it's kind of a weird thing, but I might as well say it. A lot of people, I'm very, very, very proud of the script, and it's gotten, it's a lot of great kind of reaction over the years. But a lot of people kind of assumed it was the most difficult thing that Ron and I wrote, and I don't think I think I'm speaking for Ron too. It didn't feel that way to me. I thought actually some of the other episodes were a little more difficult. I think we had written "Sun Also Rises" as the opening episode that same season. And I think I probably even struggled with that a little bit more than this. And I think the reason was something like that one with "Sun Also Rises." You want the emotions to be just right. You really want to play. You want to hit the right note with all the very real emotional things that are going on. And with something like Shakespeare, Ron's and my background had been comedy. We'd done Mork and Mindy and Night Court and half-hour comedy before Moonlighting. We had written a pilot that was actually a bickering romantic comedy detective pilot that Glenn saw, and that's why we got hired at the beginning. But it was all very comedic, and so there was something about this idea, this script. I'm not saying it was easy, but it just hit a real sweet spot for us because it was a lot of it was almost like a sketch. We were almost like parodying something, and we had this source material we could take off on, and something about that. It was so much fun to write. We just had a great time doing it, and I think a lot of it was it just hit this really perfect spot for us in terms of comedy and drama mixing, where it was more toward the comedic side, obviously, than some of the shows were. I don't know. It just it was up our alley in a lot of ways. So I don't know if that's interesting, but that is the case anyway. Way back to the BMW joke. Those kind of jokes. That's the type of joke they are. It's a contemporary spin on an Elizabethan situation, and that's where they come from. Long-winded answer. Okay.
I have a question. As far as the speech at the end, between them,
Yeah.
when they talk about the sun and the moon, how did you come up with that? Because obviously it's in the intro song where the sun and the moon is part of the lyrics. How did you come up with that speech at the end about the sun and the moon between them?
Honest to God, I believe not any of the words, but I think back in the house, I think in the play, I can't remember for sure. Someone could probably look it up. I'm pretty sure him saying it's the moon and her saying no, it's the sun, I believe is the beginning of the argument back there. I think that's in the original play, and we just took everything off of that. That's my memory. I'm not positive, but I think that's right.
And they're arguing in their house too in the beginning when he first brings her home.
That's where I'm talking about. That original
Mhm.
argument. And that's why we came back to it in the speech at the end, because that's where it had all started. Yeah.
It's very clever.
Thank you.
So how did you come up with? How long did it take to write the episode "Cut and Shoot" Atomic Shakespeare?
It took us. Oh, let me think. Well, it was one of the faster scripts we had to write there because I think we got the first, I want to say half maybe up to the wedding, somewhere in that area. We finished that, and then it started shooting. They might have even started shooting before that, but I know after the first half, about at the wedding, we handed pages in, and they shot them the next morning. We get them done at night. They'd shoot them the next morning, so it was very ridiculous for TV. That added to the cost of the episode a lot too. It just worked out that way. The show was not always run super efficiently, but it was just always about getting the best product we could out there. And so I think it frustrated the network, but Glenn was very good at just kind of leaving, making that a safe space for all of us, just to do what we needed to do to make it the best. And I believe by this time, the show was a big hit, so you can get away with a lot more, and that's what happened. But I think I would say we wrote for maybe 5 or 6 days, and then they started shooting them, and we were handing them in. So maybe 8 or 10 days of writing. I'm not positive that's right. Then shooting took. Usually with these hour longs, they take 7 or 8 days to shoot. This one took double that. I believe we might have gotten in 8 or 10 days, but they had this other unit going at the same time. I mentioned that at the beginning. Jay Daniel was directing at the same time as Will McKenzie was, and I believe we had. These are all my memories. I'm not sure I'm right, but I believe we had the equivalent of 16 days of shooting, which is, of course, why it became the most expensive episode of TV back then. It's funny. I think it cost around $3 million, and that is like a cheap episode of an hour-long show now. It's funny. So yeah, I think, I can't swear to this, but I would say beginning to end, and the editors, as they were many times working on it, they'd get the footage that night after it was shot, and they'd be cutting it, editing, making their all the sound and the stuff that they had to do overnight too. And so I wouldn't doubt that we put it beginning to end, it was probably 18 or 20 days from when we started writing to pretty much when it aired almost. I think that I might be exaggerating, but that seems about right.
And where was it filmed again?
Well, some of it on our lot, but the whole courtyard Elizabethan thing, some of the things were just our sets remade, like Petruchio's house and things like that. But the universe, we were on 20th Century Fox lot where all the offices and our stages were. We got to use the Universal Studios back lot. They had a good space for it, so that's where that whole courtyard and a lot of the Elizabethan parts of it were done.
Yeah, I think I recognized some of it because I was there 2 years ago on the tour, and I think I recognized it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't remember where it was exactly, but yeah, I was somewhere in the back lot there.
That's so cool.
It was.
How did you come up with the Shining joke with the here's Petruchio?
I don't know. Just it's the same thing. Those are such hard questions to answer. I just, Shining had been out, and I don't think I can't remember what year Shining was. But I just after I did the in case of shrew break glass thing, once he had the axe and was breaking through the door, I think I just remembered the movie and just took off. I think it was just that simple, because I just loved him peeking his head in like Nicholson did. And yeah, it just, sorry to be vague on those. It's very hard sometimes to tell you where jokes come from, but that was kind of the thinking, I guess.
There's so many great sight gags, like the axe in case of shrew break glass. There was so much good innuendo. The movie references. I mean, the episode had everything in it. It
Thanks.
Really did.
Oh, thank you. It was fun.
I know that you talked about this in your interview with us about, basically the jump the shark moment of the show when Maddie married Walter on the train. Um, one of the fans wants to know, how did that come about? And I know that you said you and Ron didn't agree with it, and several of the writers didn't agree with it.
And you just want to know generally the story around that?
Yeah, that seems to be the question. Yeah.
Well, I don't know how to far back to take it, but Glenn had been gone for a while. He had been directing a movie, Clean and Sober, and we were doing our best with not having Bruce and Cybill, together as actors, and it was just, my my line to everybody over and over, everybody who talks about the Moonlighting curse, I've just always explained why they're wrong, because all that really happened for a number of reasons, her pregnancy, his injury, et cetera, et cetera. We had a romantic comedy where the two leads were not in the same city together, same room together, same, you just can't do a show that way. It's just not ever going to be the same show it was. Like, I love Here's Living with You, Kid. I think it's a really fun script.
I love that episode. Yeah.
Thank you, but no one's really going to be excited about watching that because they're not in it. That's what they were watching, these two, as it should be. So everyone was just doing their best. That was Ron and I wrote the claymation episode too, and it was just one of our attempts to have Maddie and David in a scene together. Just even if they had to be claymation figures, we just had to get so creative. But that's the reason that the show just kind of started dying. You just can't do a show that way. You can't do, and that was absolutely a romantic comedy. And it's all about these two people, and that's that. Once they're not together for an entire season, that just kills it. It's just impossible. But back to the question. Then came back after directing a movie. And it was going to be the time, it was very, very close to the time Cybill was going to be available again, too, after the pregnancy and everything. And he came back with that idea, and, I don't know. You'd really have to ask Glenn. I can make guesses. I think, I always want to give Glenn credit because he's such a great thinker. He might have thought he just was trying to kind of, do something a little bit shocking, something that people would talk about, something, it's just something out of the ordinary. Marrying him on the train, it was a big one. And, it might have been for absolutely interesting creative reasons. It might also have been because he subconsciously not getting along with Cybill at the time. I don't want to comment too heavily on that, but she basically got him pushed off the show at the end of that season, and they weren't doing real well at the time. So I don't know what went into it, but none of us liked it, but I was kind of the vocal one in the group, and I was really strongly against it. I feel kind of weird about how strongly I was against it at the time, but I just you're in the middle of doing the show, and it really was kind of important to me to get it right. And I told him, and we kind of argued, and I might have said this to you guys, I don't know, but he and I went into my office. Ron was there too, but Ron didn't get into it because we were arguing. Glenn and I were arguing. And Glenn, at one point, I just said, I just think it's going to lose your audience. I think they're gonna hate it. And at one point said, well, maybe you shouldn't be here. He kind of threatened to fire me because I just didn't want to do it that way. And I talked him through that, and I said, of course not. And we kept talking, and he said, look, you and Ron should write the scene where she comes in and tells David and all that stuff. because, feeling the way you do about it, I think you guys will do the best you can to make it palatable. And, so we did, and I don't think it made it palatable, but, that's just the way it happened. And look, everybody has ideas that don't work out, that aren't right for some reason. I think that's one. I think Glenn talks about it now. I think he knows it didn't work out so well. But my God, he had, so many ideas on that show that were so wonderful too. So it really, it's always a mixed bag. It's unfortunate because that one, probably was a jump the shark moment. I think though, really, I think it goes back to a little bit more what I was talking about just before that story. I think the idea that we had gone through a season, it was nobody's favorite because they weren't together. I think it sort of got that ball rolling. I don't know if we would have gotten it back or not. Ron and I and Glenn, I know we've all talked separately and a little bit together back then about ideas we had to keep it going after they slept together. We had a lot of fun ideas, and I think it would have been very, very possible to do the show, to get it back on track, had we been given that chance. But when they were split up, actors, and weren't able to work together for quite a while, it sort of hurt those plans. And then we didn't really. So I don't know that we ever would have gotten the show back. I don't know, but I guess the train, the marriage moment with Dennis Dugan probably finally killed it. I think the season had really put it in that place, where it was going to be tough to rescue. Through no fault of anybody's, by the way. Nobody could help, obviously her pregnancy, his injury. Everybody just did their best with what they were given. It was just no one's fault. And then, that set the stage, and then, then the marriage thing happened. But anyway, very long-winded story, but that's kind of the situation around it. And we all just did our best to go with it. Ron and I left at the end of that season. We weren't here for the 5th. So blah blah blah. That's it. I hope that was a good enough answer. I don't know if that covers it.
I'm wondering, were you and Ron on board with writing in the pregnancy? And did you think she should have kept the baby?
I got to tell you the truth. I only watched a few episodes of the 5th season. I just couldn't really watch, and I don't know a lot about what happened. I was just sort of disappointed in all of it. So I don't think I can speak to anything that happened there. It's not fair. I just don't have enough information. I don't remember well,
But but in the 4th season, they did write in that she was pregnant.
Yeah.
And did most of the writers think that was a good idea, or?
I don't remember actually. I'm sorry. I don't remember specifically. I think we just it probably came from Glenn, and probably at the time, we might not have even been sure when we'd be able to use Cybill. So maybe it was even a decision that was made because the actress would be pregnant and when she'd be on screen. So I honestly don't remember that very well. I think we all just rolled with it. I don't remember any fights about it or anything. I think, I would guess it seemed like an interesting storyline at the time. Whatever happened, we probably were okay with it. I don't remember anyone fighting it too hard.
Why couldn't Cybill have filmed more scenes with Bruce instead of some of the the other actors more before she left?
Say that again. What do you mean exactly?
Well, basically, she filmed some scenes and they were kind of spread out throughout the 4th season because she had to, she had to go on maternity leave. So why weren't there more scenes filmed with, Bruce and her communicating in some way?
Gotcha. Well, what happened was we had to right after the third season ended, and we knew she was pregnant. We knew she wasn't available right away. Um, it wasn't going to be available for very long, so we had to write a bunch of her scenes, uh, Chicago scenes, especially with her parents and stuff, and anything we could think of with Bruce. And she had to film them by herself in that first, I don't know, May, June, that area, kind of at the end of the third season, while Bruce wasn't available. I honestly don't remember if it was because of Die Hard or because of his shoulder injury. It might have been the injury, but he was not available at that time, and she wasn't available after a certain date. When he became available again, she was gone because of the pregnancy. So they just honestly did not have any overlapping dates where they had any time together. So we had to kind of play, we had to shoot her side of things, even on the phone calls with Bruce. And, sometimes we had to guess at things. We had to guess at what Bruce was doing at the time. We didn't know what was going on in the episode that he would eventually be in. We just sort of had to create a little bit of a story for her and sprinkle it in as we went. But it was truly, it was just really unfortunate because it's just, a horrible way to have to do a show. And again, nobody's fault. It just was timing. That was it. They couldn't film any scenes together. They were never available at the same time during that summer.
He was filming Die Hard, right?
It was either Die Hard or his shoulder injury. I can't remember exactly, but yeah.
Who had the most hand in writing DePesto's rhymes? So did you all take turns as writers, or?
Yeah, pretty much whoever's Glenn started it. He was the one that came up with it. So he obviously wrote the first few in that first little short season. But I think, again, I didn't always see the writer's drafts, but I would assume most of the time whoever writes the episode was writing the poems too, whatever episode that was.
During the writing of I'm Curious, Maddie, did Cybill and Bruce have any, thoughts that they shared that how happy they were going to make the fans by Maddie and David finally getting together?
Not that I remember. I wasn't privy to that. I don't know what they were telling the media or not telling them, but I know we publicized it. But I think they were both glad that we were doing it. I think there was a consensus, with them and all of us, Glenn and the staff, that it was time. So as far as that goes, I think they were happy about it, but I don't know the rest. I'm not sure.
You and Ron came up with the idea of the kid doing his homework in the beginning of the episode?
Yeah.
And that was just kind of a way of sort of bringing the, starting the story and then bringing Moonlighting into it and breaking the fourth wall kind of idea?
Exact. All of that is true. Yeah. It's Deborah and Carl did the black and white, and it was a dream. And that's, dreams are the way, shows sometimes get into kind of an unusual situation. That's what we wanted. If we had just opened on Elizabethan courtyard, nobody would have known why the hell we were doing that. And so we had to find, called a wraparound, we had to find a way that made a little bit of sense, that kind of told people why we were doing it this way, and that it is a fantasy, but it's kind of a pretend little way to make it all smooth and work. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah,
it just ties the show to Shakespeare, to the play. That's what we needed to do.
I guess my final question is were you on the set when they were filming it? Do you have any really cool memories, funny memories about them filming the episode?
Not too. I was on the set once in a while. We were for the first several days we were writing to catch up, so we didn't get to go down there. I just went over to the Universal set once. But the ones that were done around on Fox lot, Ron and I popped down a few times. I don't. I remember Cybill having another girl on the or a young woman on the set when she was in Elizabethan costume, who had to kind of hold the train of her dress up and follow her everywhere. And I just remember I just have a funny memory of Cybill kind of walking quickly from one place to the other, to the other, to the other, and this girl following her around the whole time. I almost thought it was Cybill kind of doing it on purpose, but I think she was just kind of a little frazzled. But this girl was trying to keep up, holding her dress up. But no specific things. They were both nervous about this when it started. It was Bruce was fantastic at memorizing dialogue, and I think it stopped him for a second. I think he looked at it and thought, oh shoot, we gotta, this is gonna be tough, because they had to do it so quickly. It was so above and beyond for both of them to come up, to memorize and perform at that level. The amount of dialogue we always gave them, not just this show, but I think the fact that it was sort of fake iambic pentameter and kind of Shakespearean-ish, in the lowest sense. I think it was all kind of daunting at the beginning, but God, they just fell into it so easily. I just think they both just they were both kind of amazing in that way. They really with some very difficult challenges, with the amount of material they were given, in such short notice. Here and with so many episodes, they really just kicked ass. They were just really great. They were really good at it.
Absolutely. Could you have seen Moonlighting now, like as like a continuation? Because Glenn has talked about, the idea of what a reunion would have looked like, and recently he talked about it and said that Bruce was interested in maybe bringing it back before he got sick. Could you have seen Moonlighting sort of as a continuation, as like a streaming series? If they could have done it, could you have seen that? Like, the way that like they've done Cobra Kai, where they take the characters and they kind of add new characters into it, and they kind of continue the story. Could you have seen Moonlighting as sort of like a streaming series to continue it?
Yeah, I want to say yes. I think, if Glenn and whoever else, and Ron and I, or whoever, sit down and really figure out how to do it, I want to say maybe, but there was something about, I think people have sort of described it as lightning in a bottle, and I think, between writing and casting and all the amazing production work, I think that's true, but I also think it might have been of an era. I think one of the things, you guys posted such a sweet, wonderful review of the show a few days ago, where some guy from Film Authority called it the best episode of TV ever made. This one, and that was an amazing comment. But as I read it, I think part of the point he was making, and I think it's relevant to the series too, is that we were trying things that no one else was trying at the time. And I'm not saying Moonlighting now couldn't maybe do that, but everything we did well back then, has been sort of tried or done over and over, or wouldn't talk. Breaking the fourth wall is not going to be funny 40 years later, probably, especially if you're doing it constantly. I just think there are so many things that were of the moment for that show. And more than any, well, all of the above, the writing, the thinking, but also Bruce and Cybill. I think there was just something a little bit, it's immodest, but there was something a little bit magic about the whole situation, about the whole show, everything, the way it came together. And my overriding feeling is that it was of that moment. You could certainly come up with a show that does what you just said, where it brings other people in. recapturing the magic of that one, I think would be really hard. I think it'd be really hard. You know, you can't ever rule it out. You know, there's always creative ideas that you haven't come up with yet, but it'd be tough. I think it was a pretty special little flip in time, you know, but that's my top of the head answer anyway.
Even with if Bruce and Cybill could have done it before.
But because what is the show then? You know, it's not. It doesn't have sort of the amazing sexual and emotional tension that they had back then. You know, that's the foundation of all that bickering, is that, you know, that they love each other underneath it. I just don't know. Again, you could have them as an older married couple. You could have had them split up and they re-meet again. That might have been interesting, and they start up where they were. Then it's not as youthful, and it's not coming from that. Oh, will they get married and spend the rest of their lives together? I mean, you know, I think for the fans, it's a really fun thing to fantasize about. But I don't mean to be a downer about it. I just think it was special then, and I don't know if that could be recaptured. But hey, Glenn and Bruce apparently were talking about it a little. I don't know what they had in mind, so who knows? You know, who knows?
Yeah, it'll always be a mystery now.
It will. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff. This was amazing. Thank you for taking the time today to share all your memories and do this for the fandom. Thank you so much, and answer the question.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking me, and thanks to you guys and everyone else out there for being such big fans. It's so much fun to hear from all you guys and to see how many people are still into it at this level. It's pretty wonderful. I really love it.
Well, this is Christy. Thank you again for taking the time to share your thoughts.
My pleasure, Christy. Thank you.
Yeah. I just want to say that you guys did a show, ran a show called She Spies, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that show. I just wanted to say that I really enjoyed, the humor and everything.
Oh, thank you.
It was kind of moonlighting like, but
We absolutely, you know,
yeah.
you didn't have all the same ingredients, but we absolutely tried to do that kind of humor as much as we could, you know.
Yeah. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed it.
Well, thank you. No one ever really kind of points that one out. That's really nice. Thanks.
You're welcome. All right, enjoy your day, Jeff, and thank you so much again.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you guys for joining us today.
Yeah, have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.